So, there were people that were asking really specific questions, and then there were people that were asking, like, what is gain staging? So I think it's worth going through it from my perspective. Basically, gain staging and signal flow are very intertwined. They're worth both Googling and checking out. But the idea basically is that at every step of the recording, mixing, music creation process, every single step, there is a dynamic range of whatever you are using. It starts with, in a lot of places, a microphone. There is a maximum amount of level that the microphone can take before it starts distorting. And then below a certain amount, it's just really noisy. Now, back in the day, and this includes in when you start recording things, you put something through a compressor, you're summing it in a computer. There's the loudest possible volume or the loudest possible sound and the quietest possible sound. There's a range. That's called dynamic range. And when you get to the top, you start distorting. And back in the day, when you were recording on tape machines, you had a smaller dynamic range where at the bottom there was a lot of hiss, a lot of noise. The noise floor was very high, and the top part of the dynamic range would start distorting. That's how you get tape saturation, things like that. And so recording engineers had to make things hot enough to where maybe distorted a little bit, but not too much. But maybe some sounds you could push more than others. But if you had a very dynamic sound, you'd want to use a compressor going into it because you wouldn't want to get this hissy sound when you start turning it up. But these days, with digital technology, you basically don't have to worry about the noise floor. So you don't have to worry about things being too quiet. Very often, there are places that can come into play, but I think for 99% of people, 99% of the time, what you're really worried about is the upper end of your dynamic range, because you get distortion, and digital distortion, although might be used as a creative tool occasionally, is mostly unpleasant. It kills transients. It does all the things you don't want to do. For the most part. And so at every stage of recording, mixing, processing, mastering, all that kind of stuff, you are dealing with getting near the top end of the dynamic range, and you start to lose transients, you start to get distortion. Sometimes it's audible, sometimes it's not. And actually the stuff that's not as immediately audible might be more relevant to our discussions, because if you get a bunch of that and then you accumulate it together, you're losing fidelity and clarity. So basically at every stage of your signal flowing, from somebody singing in a room to a microphone to a preamp, compressor, EQ, getting into your digital audio workstation through your converters, whatever you're using at every stage, and plugins. Every plugin has a meter where things can hit the red. It has a dynamic range. So every step of the process, make sure that your signal is loud enough that it's coming through, but not so loud that you're going to be distorting. And I think one of the things that I certainly have done in the past and run into, and probably what we'll talk about a lot, is when you start taking a multi-track where lots and lots of individual signals that may not be clipping, and you add them together, you sum them into a master bus or subgroups or any of this sort of stuff. When you sum them together, they become louder than, the individual sounds themselves. So you need to be aware of what levels, how much gain is on all of these accumulated elements, how they add up, so that your sum total, your summing, doesn't then distort, and you keep your dynamic range. And so I think I'll let you take it from here, but there's discussions about, digital, the ceiling of digital is at 0. And so there's discussions of how close to 0 do you want to get? And I think I'll let you take it from here. I know we want to talk about things more philosophically, and then of course we'll get into more specific, but philosophically what we're talking about is signal flow and dynamic range at every step of the process, so that you are not distorting.